This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Atom Audio, Sampley, Isotope, and API. You're hearing my voice right now on the API 3122V mic pre and Spectra 1964 C610 comp limiter through Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. So get ready to rock.
Their gear, it's musical. I will always gravitate and lean toward real. And I like to say this like about my own self and career. It's like, I don't ever want to be a big deal. I just want to be the real deal. And so the gear that I use, I don't care if they're a big deal or not. I don't care if other people think they're the big deal. I want to just use the real deal.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. If you're ready to upgrade your studio to the famous sound of API's large format consoles, then you're ready for the Box, a small format console featuring the same analog circuitry and original 2520 op-amp design that made API famous for more than 50 years. Record through 8 world-class mic pre-channels, mix through 24 smooth as glass faders, and upgrade your home studio to legendary status. API now offers a virtual console experience, allowing you to get a personalized online demo of the Box at apiaudio.com. Atom Audio introduces the all-new A7V monitor with rotatable HPS waveguide for the accelerated ribbon tweeter and advanced onboard DSP-based room correction using the included A-Control software or optional SonarWorks software and measurement mic, allowing you to tune your speakers for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at atomaudio.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Ross Hogarth, a multiple Grammy-winning producer, engineer, and mixer with a long and varied list of credits in musical styles from blues to reggae to heavy metal and rock. Artists like Gov't Mule, Roger Waters, the Black Crowes, Shawn Colvin, John Mellencamp, R.E.M.and Jewel are just some of the artists that Ross has worked with in over 3 decades of recording. Ross has also been a guest on the podcast previously for episode 148, so should have a link to that in the show notes as well if you want to go listen to his story of where he came from. And we talked about a lot of stuff like working with Van Halen, Ziggy Marley, Keb Mo, and recording strings in the studio and cool stuff like that. And I guess today we're just going to catch up with Ross and see what's new project-wise and in the studio, and just glad to have you back. So please welcome Ross Hogarth back to Recording Studio Rockstars. Ross, are you ready to rock?
Yay! Let's rock.
Let's do it, man. Welcome back, man. It's been a minute.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. You know, why don't we begin wherever you want to begin? I mean, I'm guessing a lot of us have made some modifications to our studios over the past 2 or 3 years. If that's the case for you, then would you like to tell us a little bit about where you are and what's new in your studio? I mean, when you look about you, what are you surrounded by?
Well, I didn't have to make any modification. My life, I think the main modifications most of us have had to make is lifestyle, how we live and how we cope and how we're dealing with the pandemic.
Right.
And I was well prepared. I was well prepared for the isolation because I've been mixing records out of my studio here for years. So basically, I haven't mixed a record other than Van Halen's A Different Kind of Truth which is the 10-year anniversary of that record release actually this week. Which, man, I don't know where the 10 years went, but so I was well prepared with my studio and my gear to just basically transition into like, I'm not leaving the house. Emotionally, that's a whole nother story. But so I've been working out of my studio called the Boogie Motel, which is connected to my house now for a few decades, like basically since the early 2000s. I think the first record I officially mixed here might have been Ziggy Marley, and I think we won a Grammy on that, but maybe there was another record or two before that. And so I'm a hybrid guy. I've got piles of gear because I've collected, and I am a analog freaky deaky analog guy that loves tubes and transformers. But I'm also been involved in the modeling and the design of many different plugins from all the different companies.
Right on.
Yeah, so I'm a hybrid mixer. I like right now in the middle of the mix, if I turned around and said, okay, well, I've got my stereo, my pair of Altec, Abbey Road RS124s on the piano, along with the 33609, and the vocals going through a different Altec modded by Fillmore, who does retro. I've got the stay levels on the bass and on another vocal, and I've got my AMSs on and the Percassis, and I've got some gear going through some API EQs. So all those things that are in the box I do externally often.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a hybrid guy, and my mix bus is all analog with a stereo pair of Pultecs and NT-IQ and a Dramastic Obsidian, and so nerdy conversations with about transformers and all those things are kind of part of my world.
Dramastic. It's cool to hear you bring that up. John Ellis was a close friend of mine when we were teenagers in Acton, Massachusetts.
Well, John is a dear friend of mine, and I'm an early user of the Dramastic, and I go around, pimping his stuff wherever I go, because that's, to me, the best SSL style mixed bus compressor that there is. It's, with toroidal transformers and the high pass filter side chain already built in, and it just sounds good. It's amazing. I mean, it sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
It's got the grab that I love. But let's not get too nerdy too quick. But so yeah, the pandemic forced me to really accept that I'm doing this here without clients, without those interactions, and have tried to use some of the interfaces, the digital, not digital, but, I'm not thinking off the tip of my tongue, but, Zooming live with people to kind of talk about things and stuff, and trying to up the communication game so that we're not just living completely in a vacuum.
Right. Well, fortunately, we won't have to do that much longer, hopefully. But, well, that sounds pretty cool. One of the things that I noticed is when you were mentioning the analog gear, you pointed out that they were already assigned to certain things. Is that just the nature of the last session that you mic'd up, or is that more of an attitude towards how to integrate analog gear in the studio for you? Do you like to have things kind of dedicated chains where like, this sounds great, this is what we're going to use most of the time?
No, I don't have any templates. It just happens to be on the song I'm mixing right now. I want that cool Beatlesy piano and all that, but I have all my gear. All my gear is on inserts. So I have dedicated IOs to all my gear because I got rid of a patch bay a while back. I just didn't feel the need for it. So when I have more gear than I've got IO, so sometimes I'll be, using a certain set of gear on a mix, and then I'll pull some other gear in, and I'll just go to the back of the gear and switch the XLRs. So it's, moved over to the different IOs.
Right.
So,
the original patch bay.
The original patch bay, no patch bay. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's so funny because we forget, sometimes as we get complex with our studio setup, that while that may seem caveman of us, it also is one of the most sophisticated sounds we could possibly get out of a piece of gear.
Well, I just find that I like to move I like to move quickly in my, I like things that are just like right there at my fingertips. And so I'll pre-think certain, like I'll go through a song and I go, oh, on this one, I'm going to want to try this and this and this. So I'll go around to the back of the gear and maybe, move patches over cause it's all my own stuff. I know everything I've got. So it's not like I have an assistant that works here with me, which, that's a change too. I always got used to having someone that I trusted to turn around and say, hey, how's that sound? So that's one of the things that changes, because I was always a partner. I always liked having partnership. I got my buddy Jeff at Sunset Sound, and I got my buddy Wes, who just left United, and I got a couple of guys over at East West, and then one of the guys who's become a really great producer engineer came up with me as an assistant, a guy named Matt Linney, and it's always been nice having guys with me where I can turn around and say, hey, how's that sound to you? But you just have to,
Yeah, I know that feeling. I've had interns for a long time, and I sort of joke that they're kind of indentured best friends, for 3 months or whatever the length of time is. I acknowledge that I actually, even though sometimes it's a challenge to find things for them to do or to teach or, balance being focused and having somebody around at the same time, I always really just like having a friend around in the studio because it is isolating a lot of times.
Yeah, it's always been, I've loved the relationships I've had with all the guys that either brought me up or I brought up, them. And so I'm kind of, when we move on to another project that I can bring another person in at some point, I'm always in touch with Mark at Blackbird. I Skype with them or Zoom with them a couple of, every class, and Robbie and Dan over at Berkeley. And I love, the part of this that's the most important part, I think, for even doing a podcast like this or whatever is giving away something, like being of service on some level. If we're just talking about like, I, me, I don't know, then it's just, I get tired of myself. Already.
Yeah, no, it's true. I was trying to think of the last line of the Beatles. What is it like? I can't even think of it. It was like the love we take is only
love you give is equal to the love we take. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being, thank you, Rockstars, for not beating me up for knowing that line perfectly. But that's why we have people like Ross on the podcast.
Well, it's like, not to go off into some metaphysical, philosophical type of place, but I can't help but do that because that, as one, as we get a little older, and as life goes on and the mortality of people around us, which we've seen brutally during the pandemic, it really focuses on what's important. And is it really that important to concern ourselves with the hiss at the end of a song, on the fade out, where the dampener on the pedal you got to, of the piano, or if the listener's gotten that far into the song, haven't you already won? And so the things sometimes we focus on become sort of petty and small in the big picture. And there's a George Bernard Shaw quote that says that the true joy of life is being recognized for a purpose by yourself as a mighty one, being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clot of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. So,
that's what oh man,
am I going to be a little feverish, selfish little clot of ailments and grievances about something or another? Or maybe I can be grateful that, I actually get to do music still, and in the middle of a pandemic, I got a studio here to mix records out of, which as much as I am very honest about it being kind of a very weird time for all of us, I'm grateful about a lot of things.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, one of the things I wrote down as a question was something that I picked up just sort of taking a look at your world. And I didn't even know this had happened, but I discovered that you have been a fan of Thich Nhat Hanh and posted sort of a tribute to him because I didn't know he had passed recently, and so I thought that was worth discussing a little bit too.
Yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh is a major influence in my life. First off, not to get like y'all like sitting here cross-legged or anything, but I definitely meditate every day. It's a major part of my daily life and my daily program. And, Thich Nhat Hanh and his whole focus and who he was in his life of being someone who was always really, he's kind of considered the father of mindfulness meditation, first off, amongst many things. And his like giving us a different kind of perception of suffering, where, his kind of concept is that pain and suffering are inevitable to a human condition, but misery is optional. Nice. That we cause the misery. So, and he believes that, and part of the thing is believing that pain is an entry point to some very deep spiritual growth if we choose it. So it says, he has sayings like, when you begin to see that your enemy is suffering, that is the beginning of insight.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I discovered meditation over a decade ago when I went through a major divorce and like a real low point in life for me, a major transition. And I just had to manage it. And so I started practicing that, and it really did help me learn things like the art of forgiveness, beginning to have some mindfulness and some insight, and beginning to have a new chapter for me where I saw the challenges as opportunities as opposed to things that were going to be insurmountable. And hearing you mention stuff like, accepting that there are things like pain. And I know we're getting very metaphysical rock stars at this point, but these all do apply to making music, the studio, the struggle of getting a mix right, all that kind of stuff.
I'll tell you honestly, I think it's more important than the doing part often. And I'll just say something very clear. I'll try to say something that's going to sound, sort of head in the stars, but I'm going to try to say it clearly so it's understood in maybe this context of music, that a lot of young people coming up, and a lot of people, period, think they have to do something and then create a result to be something. So that in the very specific, that a young person says, all right, I got to produce a record. And then when I produce that record and I have that record, then I'll be a producer. And my belief, which comes very much from what we're talking about, and then we can get back on some other conversation, is I have to be a producer first. I have to be an engineer first. And then what am I going to do? I'll do engineering, or I'll do producing, and then I'll get a result. And if that result isn't all that it was intended to be, I'll go back to who was I being as a producer? Who was I being as an engineer? So I have to be willing to go back to the beginning and look at who I'm being and see how effective I was at the doing part of it. But I believe that the doing part comes after the being part. You have to say, okay, I'm an engineer, and then go engineer something. And then when you get that mix or record something, maybe it's not so good. And you go back to, well, like almost like a mission statement. Well, like a business doesn't just become a business and then self-shape. They have a mission statement often. A very successful business has a mission statement. And so, for me, I have to have some mission statement. I have to, who am I being, or sit there with a bunch of instruments in front of me on a multi-track of 80 to 90 tracks. Before I just start carving ahead, like getting on the freeway and driving, 100 miles of off ramps, going the wrong direction, I better pause long enough to get some vision. So that's who I'm being, is that whatever that vision is. So I believe it's really important. I don't think that it's like we're so off topic or tangent in talking about something somewhat metaphysical, because whoever anybody is being is what they're going to do. So if someone comes into the studio and they're all nervous and they're all wound up and they're all upset and they're all uptight, what they're going to do is upset, uptight, wound up, and probably get some uptight, upset, wound up kind of results. Mm-hmm. So I've learned that, if I pause long enough to kind of quiet myself before I actually go do something, it actually makes I'm more effective.
Yeah, I think that's great. So many thoughts popping into my head. One is remembering that very feeling as I was beginning and starting out. I remembered that I was, I had learned the technical side of engineering. So my first opportunities were engineering, being an assistant, being considered an engineer. My mentors they liked the idea of being able to step away from the console and have somebody else help them do that. And so those were my first opportunities. Yet I always used to say like, oh, I'm an engineer, but like, I really want to do production. I really want to be a producer. Like there was an unapologetic excuse for things. And I also remember hearing somebody once describe, I think it was the producer, Dan Brown or something, if I'm getting that right here in Nashville, somebody said, oh, this successful producer, like even when he was answering the phones as an intern, he always called himself a producer from the get-go. And that stuck with me. And I see that parallel to what you're saying, which is, sometimes people call it fake it till you make it, which is a nice, easy mnemonic to remember. But it's that simple idea of just saying, look, just be who you want to be. And then things, will happen, and I like your takeaway that if it doesn't turn out the way you expected, it's the first time I've thought about it, the way you presented it. Just circle back to the beginning and say, well, who was I being when I did that thing? And how can I maybe identify more clearly what I wanted to be?
Yeah. So often we want to blame somebody else for the things that are in our wheelhouse, and I think that's something that takes a while.
I've never done that.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, sometimes growing up means you start to take more responsibility for your mistakes or something.
Yeah. Yeah. In my studio, I chose the OWC Mini Stack STX Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and expansion hub because it seamlessly connects to my Mac Mini M1 for my dedicated audio drives, sample libraries, and backup drives. It's the perfect size to stack with the Mac Mini and add storage and connectivity over Thunderbolt or USB. Whether you have the new or older Mac Mini, nothing stacks up in your studio quite like OWC. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Ever wonder how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars? It's because I've been cheating by using Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you are hearing RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from Isotope. Try out the subscription option for yourself with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. And another thought when you were talking about Thich Nhat Hanh and, this idea of you can't avoid the pain in life or the pain in the studio, for example, but you can learn how to intentionally respond to it. So you can decide whether it translates to a sense of suffering for yourself. And one of my physical practices that I've gotten into and been doing a lot actually over the past couple of years is I follow this guy named Wim Hof who teaches a routine of deep breathing and ice baths. And every time I get in that ice bath, even when yesterday was a warm one, which was 34 degrees in the ice bath, and get in there for 2 minutes. And it's amazing how you can have an initial response, but you can learn to just be really calm in the midst of something like that. So, maybe we can pivot this back to, keeping it on the topic of studios and music, but I certainly know that the art of creating music, whether it's recording well, having a great band practice, writing a great song, trying to get your mix to sound awesome, mastering, whatever it is, inevitably part of that process is the pain of not getting it as good as you were shooting for. And so then what are you going to do at that point?
Is that a question or a statement?
Sure,
Because it sounds like it sounds like a statement.
It was a little bit of a lid shut up and give Ross a chance to talk.
Yeah, because I wasn't really sure. Well, I'm gonna pivot kind of completely away from that to basically staying inside of what we're talking about, which is what I've learned in all of these kinds of conversations that are somewhat metaphysical or spiritual or philosophical. That in the end, most of any success, and I don't mean success like I'm scratching my chest and going having bravado about, or even counting the number of records or whether you win a Grammy or whatever. To me, success is when you have a successful project. It's when you finish a piece of work with an artist and they're really happy, and we still have a relationship that is hopefully stronger than when we even started because we've now gone through a whole experience together. And that circles me back to part of like the things that I like about this working in music and working with creative people is that when you get inside of it, it can be a struggle. It can be painful. It can be emotional. And it's really about how well we communicate together. For me as an engineer and a producer or just a mixer or whatever it is, you have to get along with people and you have to learn how to communicate to people. And it's almost impossible for me to communicate to somebody if I'm so caught up in my head about myself that I'm not even hearing what they're saying or even hearing what's coming out of the speakers. So I've learned, and I'm always learning. And this record that I just recently finished, which is a tribute to the iconic guitar player Johnny Winter.
Yeah.
So fantastic. I produced his brother. Well, Edgar and I produced a record together. That's a record honoring his brother. And so Edgar asked me over 3 years ago if I could help him make this record that he initially did not want to make. It was too painful to him in 2014 when his big brother died. And that big brother was the one that inspired him to do and be, as you call it, a rock star. Edgar always signs off every conversation that we have or signs off his emails with rock and roll. He's like, nice. Let's rock and roll. And that was Johnny's thing. And so Johnny pulled Edgar up on stage at Woodstock in front of 500,000 people. And that's where Edgar caught the bug. So when his brother died, who's, one of the most iconic blues guitar players in the history of rock or just rock and blues, yeah. He didn't even know how to deal with that. And I understand that. And then finally his wife, Monique, convinced him, look, you got to make this record. You got to honor your brother and you got to do it right. So he pulled me in, and we've got this 17-song record that comes out April 15th. And every song is a kind of a who's who. And I was able to bring in my friends, guys that I have long-term and, either have produced or have had something to do with, and they're pals. And, and he brought in some of the people like Ringo that he's going back on the road with Ringo. So Ringo, the song that Ringo's on, we have Michael McDonald, Joe Walsh, and Ringo, wow. Along with Edgar playing piano on that, So we've got Joe Bonamassa and Kenny Wayne Shepherd and my buddy Phil X, and we got Keb Mo and Billy Gibbons and Derek Trucks and my pal David Grissom and from Texas, and Joe Walsh and Bob Glob on bass, and Ringo and Michael McDonald and Kenny Aronoff playing percussion, and John McPhee from the Doobies and Billy Payne from Little Feat, and Steve Lukather and Doyle Bramhall Jr. and Waddy Wachtel and Taylor Hawkins. I have him singing on a song, and I just called up my pals and said, hey, I'd love you to, if you're a fan of Johnny's, and let's pick a song. And all of that goes back to what I was saying, Warren Haynes and Robin Ford and Bobby Rush. And it goes back to what I was saying about relationships and connecting with people. there could have been a lot of just doing on this record, but Edgar and I went through and curated a set list, a song list, and I helped him very, implicitly and detailed curate the guest artists. And the whole project was, a few years in the making, inclusive of this whole pandemic. And it wasn't easy, and there was some pain and suffering, but there was no misery. The misery is when things aren't going well, and then we just sit here and we blame each other and we start pointing fingers. No, it was always about finding a way, finding a solution, finding a way out, dealing with emotional pain for Edgar of like, man, I can't sing this song. There were songs where he said, like the song with Michael McDonald called Stranger is one of the few ballads that Johnny ever wrote. And Edgar said, this is too painful for me to sing. I can't sing this song. It's just so hard. I don't want to put myself through it. And so we talked about who could sing the song and give it the emotional gravitas, but also put the joy into the work of it without it just being a painful experience. And that's when Edgar said, well, when Michael McDonald, I was in his first solo band. He goes, I haven't talked to him in a long time. I go, well, I said, I work with the Doobie Brothers. It's easy. I'll call John McPhee. We'll get to Michael. We'll record the vocal up at John McPhee's. And then while we're up there, we'll do Mojo working and we'll have those two guys sing backgrounds like the, Mojo working, and we'll just be a joyous occasion. So, that's where I think we get to have choices. One of the things I've learned is that I'm not just a product of some circumstances I get forced to have to deal with. I have some choices to make, and it's on me to go, oh, well, let's make this a joyful experience, even though we're honoring your dead brother, So it was a really, really powerful experience to go through with Edgar. And he's so happy. Like, he was incredibly meticulous with me on the mixing. Like, he would have some very specific things he heard in his head. And sometimes I had to really create those for him. And other times I got to say to him, because we have such a close relationship, and without that relationship, it would never, I don't think we would ever finish the record. Edgar would have just let go, given up. It's too hard.
Yeah.
And because of that relationship and being committed to work through the hard times, I was able to just be, tolerant of all his changes he would want to make on songs. And then Richard Dodd down in Nashville did such a beautiful job mastering, and Edgar would come back and go, could we add a little bit more low end? And Richard and I would laugh and we go, this guy really wants what he wants. And so Richard was beautiful to work with, and then cutting the vinyl with Jeff Powell down in Memphis. And
nice.
And Jeff's, who's beautiful, cat, one of my dearest friends. And we got 4 sides of really wide, deep groove vinyl. And so in the end, I'm really happy with the result. And the process was really lengthy and very detailed. And, I had to dig in and we stuck it out. And in the end, it goes back to the part of the conversation we were having about who am I going to be going into this? Am I going to be of service to Edgar, to honor his emotions and not throw up my hands in the air and go, I can't put up with this? Or am I going to just sort of pause long enough on those days when he's sort of driving me crazy and just go, well, he's driving me crazy because he wants something he's not getting, and it's not personal. And if I take it personally, I will throw my hands up in the air, So, and that's not to say that there were not many days in the past on other projects where I really took shit personally, and it made it worse. And it was me, and we learned. We better learn from those things, or else probably should just bail out and go do something else,
Yeah. I've definitely been in those shoes where I've taken stuff in the studio very personally. I've taken, that palpable frustration in the room as a personal problem, and it's so helpful when you begin to learn to not take it personally and immediately, just pivot and try and figure out what it is that everybody's wanting or needing. And it's interesting to hear you tell that story too, because it's clearly a strength of yours. I mean, last time you were on the podcast, you were talking about making the Rita Coolidge record and all the challenges you guys had surrounding that as well. And it sounds like you've, it's been a while that you've figured out how to be in touch with that self barometer for creating that says like, how am I going to bring the best to this project and not let the challenge of the situation and of life derail what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned is that I used to write contracts in my head that other people, I thought I had them sign the contract that I wrote in my head, that you didn't know that you were supposed to have signed a contract that I wrote in my head for you. And in that contract was, some self-seeking stuff, was like whatever it might have been, that then I held you to that contract that you never knew you signed. And then when you broke that contract, the contract you never signed, the one you didn't even know, I was going to hold it against you. So it might have been, it might have been a big thank you that I expected, or whatever it might have been. And you know what? In a lot of times, this is a thankless, we work in a somewhat thankless environment. And, I can't expect a band to like thank me for everything I've ever done for them when they themselves are so, they don't even know which side is up or down, So one of the benefits of working with someone who maybe is a little more highly evolved in their own emotions, as people get older, sometimes they do, they start to know what they don't know, and they realize that they made some mistakes. So, Edgar is a very grateful human. He's a very, when he's happy, he's happy. He knows how to say thank you, which is huge. When someone says thank you to any one of us, I think you could ask most of your guests that, that a thank you goes a long way. That just a nice, simple gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this interview. Thank you for making this seamless, or whatever.
Yeah.
You sit back and you go, wow, yeah, man, cool. I like being appreciated. So, a lot of times I wrote this contract that says you're going to appreciate me. And then when I didn't get appreciated, you broke the contract. You didn't know you signed it. So that helps me to know that I do that. So I don't expect that, so.
That's deep, man. That's really brilliant. I love that analogy. I've absolutely done that before. I'm probably still doing it today. I'm probably doing it on this podcast, and I haven't discovered what it is yet. It's
okay,
just
well,
like, there's
let me know that I'll sign it, dude. Then
I got to find it. I can't. My file system is terrible. I can't even find the contract. When your band hits the studio, it's smart to have all the songs, mixes, and notes in one place. But figuring out how to share all the files can be frustrating. There's always somebody in the band who can't seem to log in or wants to use a different platform. Samply.app makes it easy to collaborate and communicate by creating a shared project so the whole band can get organized before the session. Just upload a voice memo, lyric sheet, song charts, photo, video, mixes, masters, or even invoices, and start commenting. Sign up for your free account now with 25 gigs of storage and unlimited projects, and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade at samply.app. The Spectra 1964 C610 comp limiter brings fast, clean, quiet compression and limiting to your recordings and mixes. The C610 includes the famous Spectra 101 amplifier used in legendary studios like Stax, Ardent, and Record Plant. I love my C610s for drums, vocals, guitars, and especially bass, which helps me get the perfect low end in my mixes. And you can make your mixes rock at Spectra1964.com. As you talk about meditation, and you talk about just surviving life that way, what are some things that you've learned about how to have the lifestyle of the studio and the schedule of the studio and integrate an important thing like meditation into your daily routine or whenever it is that you do it? Just talk to us about ways that you find balance, but life-work balance.
Well, body, mind, and spirit. I mean, I'm certainly not the absolute picture of health, but at the same time, I don't smoke or do drugs, and I don't, I really like working out. I like sweating. So I have a extra cycle. I got weights out on the back porch. I got a wetsuit. I have a surfboard. Or more than one. I have.
Oh, you near the beach?
Well, I don't live at the beach. I live in the valley, but it's a straight shot to the beach. Where I live, I can get to the beach without getting on the freeway. So it's a straight shot over the canyon. And so, yeah, the beach is, God puts on a show for free at the beach.
Yeah.
It's any time of day or night, God puts on a show for free. It's free. It may cost parking, but I know where to park where it's not, I don't have to pay. And
right.
And so that's one of the things. I don't know if I could live landlocked. So, walking, hiking, getting outside, breathing air, those things are crucial. As far as meditation, I almost feel remiss, but I feel like I should. There's an app. I love guided meditations, and I love actually all the content that is on a specific app. It's called Waking Up. Sam Harris. He's he has a brilliant podcast, and his app is awesome, and it's super easy to use. And there are all these guided meditations and all these talks, and Alan Watts, and all sorts of great. There's an amazing amount of IP on there to grab.
Cool.
To be able to, and it's like, I don't know, $99 a year or something ridiculous, Right. So with the amount of money that people spend on coffee and Starbucks and all that shit.
Or therapy. That's like less than one therapy session.
There you go. Yeah. It's like, you can shove a nickel up your ass a day at a time and pay for the thing. So I'm sorry, but
that's
I mean,
good.
yeah.
there's our intro quote right there, Rockstar. Good stuff. Yeah.
It's like for me, there's this app where I just push play once a day. I try to do it in the morning. Sometimes the morning gets away and I'll have to pause. And the way I look at it is, with all the time that we spend doing any number of things, if you can't take 10 or 15 or 20 minutes out of your day for yourself, because that time that I spend is absolutely my own. Yeah. Meditation is the most connected to the moment that I can ever get, because the moment happens right now. There is no future. There is no past. Those are all illusory. Our past is just some memory we have of whatever might have been. Maybe we ate breakfast, or yesterday we did this, or, to be really heavy, my mother is transitioning as we speak. She's been doing a very slow transition out of this world. But, in this moment, she's still here. Right in this second, she's still breathing, so the only moment we get is right here, right now. So if I take 10 or 15 or 20 minutes or a half hour, however long I take out of my day for me, that's the purest me time that I'm ever going to have in the moment. And so that's real important. So all those things, I have really close friendships. I think the pandemic has been awful for a lot of us, and also really beautiful because it's made me look at people I really don't want in my life anymore. Right. I think we call that the senility prayer,
Yeah. Well, I have to be honest. I've also lost some friendships, but what you're saying about the present is such a mind-blowing topic. This idea of there is no future, there is no past, there is only the present. And I immediately started thinking about that because this is a recording and a music podcast. I started thinking about, what does that mean to us about music, the studio, the moment? Do you have any more thoughts about how that directly applies to what we do in the studio? Like musically?
Say it one more time.
Well, so this idea of there is only the present, there isn't the future. So yeah. If I'm at the beginning if I'm at a point in a song and in music, it's this idea there really isn't the chorus in the future. There really isn't the intro in the past. There's just the music that's happening right now while it's happening.
Well, I don't know what to say about that. That's almost, I'm not sure if that's going to give any power in a conversation to your listeners. But what I think might give some power is often, and this goes back to meditation or being present to listening to what's going on in my head. Because the more I get to the more I meditate, the more I'm present to my thoughts or lack of thoughts. Because sometimes my meditation practice is to try to clear myself from sitting there and thinking about, I got this to do, and I got that to do, and I got this to do, and I got to run this errand, and it's like the whole laundry list of everything that comes into our heads. And so what I'm really not doing is I'm not being very present to that actual moment, where the only thing I really want to be present to is the in-breath, the out-breath, and just being in the moment. So the more I learn how to meditate, the more I get in front of the speakers, and I actually hear what's coming out of the speakers, not what's going on in my head. Because the thing that I think about is how many times I missed a great performance because I was expecting a different note or a different set of notes or a different something to come out of the speakers. So instead of hearing what was actually coming out of the speakers, I was filtering it through what was already in my head. And, and when you work with really gracious, great artists, they'll go, okay, cool, I'll do it again. When maybe what they just played was the greatest fucking thing they were ever going to play. And they don't know any better, because all musicians will tell you, I can do it better. I can do it again. I can do it better. Maybe except for maybe Neil Young or someone like that, who's notorious for first takes. Or when I made records with Mellencamp, and that band did a lot of first takes. But in general, most musicians are like, yeah, cool, I can do it better. So if I'm not really listening to what's coming out of the speakers, I'm probably going to miss it. And I've probably missed in my life, and I'm not going to sit here and regret that. But all I can say is my goal is to try to get more present and get better, because then my mixes get better. Because instead of like doing something really great and I'm not even aware of it because I'm thinking about something else, I've learned to pause enough times and listen back to something and go, wow, I never expected that to do what that is doing, but that's really cool. So I should just leave that and move on, or that's not doing what I expected to do, and I'm not going to be lazy about it and just leave it and move on. I'm going to get it to do what I want it to do, because I'm listening enough, and now it's important, because that moment wants to be important in the song, and I don't want to just glaze over it, because, maybe that's a really important moment of so it's like, it's listening. It's actually listening to what's coming out of the speakers, not what's coming out of my head.
Yeah, that's brilliant, man. I think that's a fantastic answer to that question. And that actually lends a lot of power to me, because I know exactly what you're talking about. It is so easy. I mean, here's a good example of that happening on a podcast interview. If I was thinking too much in my own head about what I wanted to say next, I would miss your answer, and that is something that I constantly have to try and stay in touch with. And that happens in the studio. That happens with the speakers. I was thinking of the way that happens to me if I'm on the other side of the glass too, which is when I'm playing the song, I can lose myself in the moment that I'm actually playing by worrying about something else that's coming or some other distraction or whatever. Or I can lose myself by thinking, man, this thing I'm doing right in this moment is so cool that I forgot to be ready for the chorus to come around and hit the right note, So I think that's a great insight.
And that goes back to early on. I was fortunate to work with certain people, and there's too numerous to name, but I was fortunate to work with people that were intuitive enough about the process and about record making and music to say things to me like, record everything. Don't ask, don't think, just do. So I learned that anytime anyone was playing anything, I was in record. And I learned how to have, like, at that time it was a tape machine. I learned how to have the tape machine on a leash that was long enough for me to move around a control room. So no matter where I was, I had the remote next to me. So if an artist just so happened to start his band, there's a real story on this. So, I learned this. And so Keb Mo and I are making one of his first records. And we had just gotten a master take on a song. And he cut everyone loose except the bass player and the drummer, because he was going to teach them the next song, because we just had a nice, successful, all right, that take's great. All right, I'm going to change the reel. And so I'm changing the reel because, to your Pro Tools unit users, we were still using tape. It's that thing. It's that plug-in that goes around and around that UA and other people make that has hiss on it. So I'm changing the reel, and I realize as my reel is spinning, because that's what we did. We spun the tape and turned the take-up reels over, and then we'll go. Now we're about to go and throw a leader on and go into record when we're ready. I realize that he's showing the band, the drummer and the bass player, this tune, except they're now starting, and it's a 12-bar blues, basically. And by the time I get the reel to the end and turn it over, I know I already missed so many bars of whatever it was they were playing, because it was complete, producer, artist direction. Yeah, man, you guys take a break, get a cup of coffee, and Ross here, just put up a reel and we'll get this after I teach him the song. But I realized I got to get into record as fast as I possibly can. Now, you talk about a God shot. I just jumped to the remote as fast as I can get my two fingers to push play record once I got that tape over. And Keb Mo plays this whole song down, and he's looking in the control room at me as the fade out of the song. And he says to me, he goes, "Did you record that?" And he's looking at this look I have on my face, which is this look is like, I don't know what I got, because I got into record as fast as I could possibly get into record. And then he looks at this look on my face, which is this look of bewilderment and almost consternation. And he goes, "You're not happy about something, are you?" And that's him talking on the mic. He comes in and we push play, and the bias ramp of the tape machine goes in at just before the downbeat of what creates in that 12-bar blues, that 12-bar intro, because they had gone around the intro twice for him to show him the chords. And I got the whole song minus the double intro, which you probably would have edited off anyway, because it was just like them stumbling into this feel. And the drummer doesn't even have his snares on, so he's hitting the snare drum like the timbali.
Which is a great sound, right?
Which is a great sound. And then he just naturally realizes that he's been playing with that. So he waits until the pickup to the first chorus where he kicks on the snares, as if you were like, you could never have planned that either. But he's like, so his drummer Laval and Reggie McBride, we get this take. And if you listen to the record Slow Down, which we won a Grammy on, there's a song called Letter to Tracy, which is just the three of them with no overdubs, that first take. And at the end of the song, you get to hear Keb Mo say to me, "Hey, did you record that?" He goes, "I think you did, and you're not happy about it, are you?" Or something like that. Because I had this look on my face that was just like, I don't know what I got, and I hope I got it, because you'll never know until you play it back. Yeah. And the bias ramp at the top of that, it kind of goes, you couldn't have planned that shit. But talk about like, learn how to always be in record. Learn always to never question whether you're supposed to be in record, because what you get. You can always not use it, but if you don't record it, you can't ever use it. So all those first take vocals, all those test runs, all those like we're doing a demo. For me, there are no demos. Demos are just demonstration tapes for a song. If you're in a studio and you got here recording studio rock stars, you want to be a recording studio rock star? It's not called demo studio rock star. This is not. We're not on the demo studio rock star podcast. That's right, here. Man. We're fucking recording engineers, so we don't do demos.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it.
That's what I got to say about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Adam Audio introduces the new A7V monitor. for home and pro studios, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. The all-new A-series line of monitors delivers the same highly accurate, transparent sound and unique accelerated ribbon tweeter design that has made ADAM audio famous for over a decade, but now includes new innovations such as the rotatable high-frequency propagation system waveguide, allowing the XART tweeter to disperse sound with controlled consistency, and DSP-based room correction and speaker voicings. Using the A-Control software or SonarWorks and Measurement Mic, you can now integrate advanced filters directly to the DSP onboard the speaker to help compensate for imperfect room acoustics without introducing annoying latency or requiring plugins. This allows you to tune your monitors for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want to meet your ever-evolving studio needs. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at adamaudio.com. Look, it might be hard to describe in a few words what gives records a legendary sound, but it would be pretty easy to describe in a few letters: API. For more than 50 years, API Audio has created large format consoles for world-class studios. Famous for co-founder Saul Walker's circuit designs and original 2520 op amp, the sound of API consoles is the sound of great music. API now brings that legendary sound to your home studio with The Box, a small format console featuring the famous API circuitry that is the perfect analog addition to your digital studio. The Box gives you 8 recording channels on the left with built-in mic pre's, high-pass filters, direct inputs, customizable 500 module slots, and 16 summing channels on the right. Or you can mix using all 24 channels, including aux sends, inserts, and silky smooth faders. API now offers a virtual console experience with a personalized online demo of the Box, 16082, or 2448 console. Sign up for your demo now at apiaudio.com. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Ross Hogarth, joining us from somewhere near the beach, not too far from the beach in the valley. Ross, you ready?
Woodland Hills, Calabasas.
Okay,
Woodland Hills, Calabasas, California, kind of near Topanga Canyon.
Okay, good. I like it. It all just sounds cool to me. You know, when you don't live in California or in a canyon or any place called Topanga, it all just sounds very exotic and cool. And that's the way we feel about it. Us landlubbers.
Okay.
I have spent time in LA though, and I have spent time in the canyon and up on Mulholland and experienced some of that, and I love it. And I love coming out to visit for NAMM and all that kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to. Hopefully, as this podcast comes out, I will be reminiscing already about the most recent visit. So, we were talking about the mindfulness thing, and I've mentioned this on the podcast, but one of the things I've enjoyed recently was rewatching Twin Peaks and then kind of getting into David Lynch again and then discovering that he has a lot to say about transcendental meditation and how important meditation is for sort of unlocking our creativity and stuff. And I wondered if that was part of the story for you at all, or whether you knew about David Lynch and his involvement, or whether you just had more thoughts about how it sort of unlocks your own creative spark.
Well, I am aware that David Lynch is a very deep TM, or transcendental meditation, and I've never learned how to do TM. Some of the guys I grew up with, so I grew up in New York, so there's a side of me that's just like this, like, and pardon me, since this is rock stars, I can say shit like punk. I'm just a punk ass kid wearing Converse All-Stars, just a snot-nosed punk ass kid from New York. And, if you said you were spiritual or God, I was like, here, I got your God. I got your spiritual. I'm going to stick my foot up your ass.
Right.
And I came out to California, and I just, and then all these people in California are like, namaste. And I'm like, yeah, namaste, stay away from me, motherfucker. And, there's a part of me that's still sort of like this, cynical sort of dude. But I have learned so much about myself by just listening to myself, like not me talking, but like quieting my mind and listening to what's actually, going on. Because if we're going to be making music or recording music or whatever, the thing I've noticed is that the people that I've worked with that are really, really connected tend to be connected to some spiritual place. And that spiritual place tends to be not something you can put your finger on. And it's just something that happens to be there. And that's the thing for me. I've gotten to be more connected, to where my heart is, I think, through not only some of the pain and suffering I've had to go through in my life with loss and losing people and losing friends and people dying of drug overdoses and all the heavy shit that happens, but being more grateful to, like, the good things and being able to say, this is a good day. I'm having a good day. Not every, misery doesn't always need to love company. So, and I think those lend me and lead me back to sort of just accepting that I came out of, a pretty dark childhood, in some ways. Like, I wasn't some kid that was beaten and all this other stuff, but I definitely got out of New York to save my ass and save my skin. And I started my career very young. I've been doing this, been on my own, paying my own bills since I was basically 15. So, there was a side of me that was a bit of a, like kind of somewhat of a victim mentality early on. And, that doesn't really serve anybody, so I really do. I love what I do. And I end up working with a lot of people that I really enjoy working with. And the ones I don't, I mentioned this thing called the senility prayer before we jumped off to the break. And, I was saying that during the pandemic, I've really, the senility, which is like a take off the serenity, because, serenity prayers, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to know the things we can, the wisdom to know, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
Well, the senility prayers, God grant me the senility to forget the people I never liked anyway, the good fortune to run into the ones I do, and the eyesight to tell the difference. So as the older I get, I just want to remember. I just want to be able to have a memory, to have the eyesight to know the ones I like, and then let me forget the ones I never liked. And that's part of what the pandemic has done, and part of what I think getting older does.
Yeah. Well, I think about eyesight and seeing the computer screen, and maybe there's a part of me that says, boy, wouldn't it be nice if I really just couldn't click it anymore and all I could do was just listen, and I had to have somebody else's help and pick up a guitar and just play instead,
Tell me about it. Well, and I've done a lot of playing in the last couple of years too. I've got this amazing 12-string guild that I've had since I was a kid that I love putting in an open tuning and playing, like just putting it in open tuning and playing slide, just try to be Leo Kottke or somebody like that. Or Yorma or any of my favorite, cats. And, and it's a low, I tune it down. And, so there's been a lot of moments because of this isolation, or whatever we want to call it, that has caused me to go back to like playing more music and seeing how that opens our hearts up and opens our spirits up. And, so
yeah, let's call it me time.
And for me, it's not about like I'm trying to be like, I'm not trying to compete with someone's spirituality and like, oh yeah, man, I read Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm such a spiritual, I'm on the spiritual totem pole or something, it's like, nah, just, anything that can remind me of other people on a daily basis and get me out of me and have a better day, then, that's, I think, just keeps going back to like, we got today. That's what we got. right here, right now? Am I enjoying this conversation with you? That's about as good as it's going to get right here, right now. If I want it better, then let's make this a better conversation right here, right now.
Right.
Because the conversation's over. If I wanted to have a better conversation, I already missed it.
Yeah, right. If you're thinking about it, it just happened.
It just, there it went. Yeah.
Hey, one of the other things I noticed is that I think you were sharing some paintings from your son. Also thinking back to you being young and moving out to the West Coast and stuff, and which is very cool. I'm a parent too, and I always say my daughter's the best record I ever made. But it's also worth asking, the ways that you find, meditation and mindfulness helps with creating music in the studio, but maybe you've also found that other forms of art help you find better ways to create in the studio.
Well, I was raised by an artist. My dad, he's a well-known in his genre as the original illustrator Tarzan, and his How to Draw books. My dad was B-U-R-N-E Hogarth, and so my dad was, a real, he was in his own right as an artist and an illustrator, and that whole skill skipped me and hit my son Brady, who is absolutely incredible. And that's just not dad talking. That's like, you just take a look at the work he's doing. So yeah, I'm super proud of this kid, and I'm super proud of his journey that it's taken him. Now he's 24, but he has struggled a lot in his life with certain things that he's way more highly evolved at his age than I ever was. And so it's really amazing to have him as kind of a motivator for me to do and be better, and to he's always bringing stuff to me and ideas. And we were just talking before this podcast, and he's working on a 6-foot painting, this brand new painting for someone. He just got commissioned this amazing painting of the whole Marley clan at Bob and all these guys sitting at Sunsplash. And I'm just so proud of this kid. Like, he's just really doing some great work. So I definitely, when I listen to music, when I'm mixing, I definitely like to mix with a visual, like the depth of field. I like to try to place things in the audio depth of field where something's above and below, not just left and right. And there are ways of doing that with EQ, actually. You can pull things down with certain amounts of low end, and high pass things, they'll go up higher into the mix. So I definitely like foundationally my kick and my bass and things to be pulled down lower and sitting not only as low end, but like foundationally, as if you were looking at an image. What's under, what's in the middle, what's above the heart, what's above the the horizon, what's up in the air, what's way up in the left leg, so I like to position things, and I've learned, and I'm learning more and more. And this has nothing to do with Dolby Atmos or anything. I have not been doing, and I'm not like, if you even go into that conversation, I won't even be able to have it, because that's one that I'm not doing. I talked to Vance the other day, and he was finishing up his room, and I know that Reed is deep in it, and Dave Way, and then my dude Steve Jenwick, and Nick is trying to learn how to do this stuff on, in his room. And man, all power to all those guys. I don't really have a space here in my studio that really would really take to a full surround mix setup. I love my room, but I'm not about to completely tear it apart to do Atmos.
Right.
In a stereo field, I definitely like mixing. I think of colors. I think of where, dimensions of space and all that. So, and I think that comes from having been brought up, by a visual artist.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here browsing through a Google search result of your dad's name, and it's just, what a bunch of incredible artwork, and anatomy, studies of anatomy. My mother was also an artist, and she never really saw a whole lot of fame with her art, but she was very prolific. And I was fortunate to bring a whole truckload of, or a van load, I should say, of her paintings back down to my studio. And then I realized as I was sort of putting my studio together with these big open walls, I was like, oh, I've got an art gallery just sitting here waiting for me to put artwork up. And, I like doing that. It's interesting to think about the interaction of the visual and the music. I mean, I know that, from watching the TV shows and stuff that Rick Rubin with Shangri-La Studios has sometimes described setting things up where it's more of like a blank white, without any thing. And then some studios are just full of cool stuff to look at. Have you ever had a take on whether it's helpful one way or the other? What are some more thoughts about that? About, whether we should just have all kinds of cool stuff in our studio, or whether it should be really sparse and simple and let the music be the all kinds of stuff?
Man, I don't have any advice to give. I think, anytime, if I was listening to this podcast and I went down this road of like, well, I think your listeners should do this, I think your listeners should do that, that would probably be like the point in the podcast. I just turned it off, So
Good enough.
I don't want anybody to I'd rather, if I have something to say in 10 minutes from now, maybe if they still keep listening. So right now I'd rather keep them listening. I don't say the should word to anybody anymore. I think advice given without any unsolicited is criticism. So no worries. I know my studio, I have a couple of my platinum. There's only a few of the plaques. A shitload of plaques are in storage. The plaques that are on my wall are reminders of very, very important moments of my life. Like I have Jewel's record on my wall. That was the year that Brady was born. I have Motley Crue on the wall. That was a really important record at the time because it was just a really heavy moment of my life, and what I was going through for a bunch of reasons. And that record, it was a lot of fun and it was a lot of insanity too. I have R.E.M.'s Life's Rich Pageant because that was the year I got married. I made that record, and we had finished Mellencamp Scarecrow, and his studio was open, and that's when Don Gaiman said, "Hey, we're going to go do R.E.M. in Mellencamp's," and I was like, "R.E.M. Oh yeah, oh cool," And that record is sort of a seminal record because it wasn't that I was the biggest R.E.M. fan at the time, but when I made that record, I became a huge R.E.M. fan. That record, making that record with them, they're such amazing people. And that record, I thought we did a really good job. And it's a unique record for me because I never really made another record like that afterwards. And then I got the two there were a couple of bookend Scarecrow was really important because we had put together John's studio for that record. And I was, that was a record that I had, I remember wiring in the winter on my back in a trough for Greg Edward, who was the chief engineer of John's studio, building the studio. And then Big Daddy, which was the other Mellencamp record. Those two records, I learned a lot from John about how to make records, how you have to capture, like we were talking earlier. I needed to be able to get record quality sounds so a band could play a first take and I could make a record on a piece of 24 track tape and fit everything that needed to make everything that needed to get recorded got on, into that 24 track in the moment. Cause John's band had two guitar players, bass, drums, singers playing percussion, John playing acoustic, and accordion or organ player, Johnny Casella, fiddle player, all that shit going down all at once. And that goes back to that, we don't do demos. So those are the only records on my wall of all the many records I've made that, there came a time where you just weren't going to get any plaques anymore because you weren't even no one really, besides I think big hip hop artists, go golden or even platinum anymore. But there was a point in time in the 80s to 90s where basically every single record I worked on was either a gold or platinum record.
Wow.
And a lot of them don't really matter to me because, I mean, not that they don't matter, but they don't matter in an emotional way. So
right.
the plaques I have on my wall are really important moments of my life that remind me of those moments. And then my brother, who's not with us anymore, was a framer, and he put a couple of the Grammy plaques together, like Love Is My Religion and Slow Down. Keb Mo of the other, of the ones I've won Grammys, Taj Mo is one of them. But so these, and then all the rest is like different art. I've got art from like Neon Park, he did all the Little Feat covers, and I was a roadie back then, and I have prints of his art, and I have some of my dad's art, and I have an album cover of the Grateful Dead called Blues for Allah. So when I moved out to California from New York, that covered that band in that moment, living in San Francisco. Blues for Allah was actually, I wasn't really the biggest Grateful Dead fan until I was in San Francisco, and everybody around me was. And culturally, there's something about living somewhere where all of a sudden you go, oh, wow, I see why this band is what it is, until you kind of, there's things I don't understand that sometimes you have to, like in California, I didn't ever really understand the Beach Boys growing up in New York. I was never into them. I just didn't understand it until someone said to me, man, you should listen to Pet Sounds.
Yeah. I just gave that to my daughter for Christmas, and she loves it. It's so much fun to hear her just putting it on the vinyl.
It's like, you should put on a set of headphones and listen to Pet Sounds. I'm like, I'm not that big a Beach Boy. Oh, no, man, you don't know what you're missing. And then I'm like, holy shit, how did I miss this? I was listening to Pink Floyd or something.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah. East Coast kids. Have you ever wished you could remove the click-track bleed from a singer's vocal mic, the sound of shuffling feet from a full choir, or clicking noises from the valves of an otherwise brilliant trumpet solo? These are just some of the incredible things I have been able to clean up, edit, or remove from a recording using the magic of iZotope RX. Great for mixing, with a collection of plugins for your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks. With a set it and forget it simplicity that lets you focus on your creativity in the studio while you let iZotope handle the audio challenges. You can even adjust your vocal, bass, and drum levels inside of a finished stereo mix using the wizardry of rebalance. RX is truly magical. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at iZotope.com/rockstars, or use the coupon code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. OWC now brings you the Mini Stack STX, the world's first Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expander, perfectly sized to stack with the Mac Mini and the ideal storage and connectivity companion for Thunderbolt or USB-equipped computers and devices. With a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, you can expand your Mini's storage capacity to gigantic proportions. 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports enable you to connect to millions of Thunderbolt, USB, and future USB 4 drives, displays, AV mixers, cameras, and tablets, as well as desktop accessories like a keyboard, card reader, or mouse. I'm using the Mini Stack STX paired with my Mac Mini M1 to house my dedicated audio SSD and sample libraries, and it works great in my studio. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. I mean, I also didn't think anything special about the Beatles until I moved down here and started working in a studio, and people were, really raving about them in the studio. And I was like, you mean the guys, like the I Want to Hold Your Hand guys? You guys are way excited about them. And then I started listening, and it was the same feeling. It was like, how did I not know that this sounded this awesome, or I had just forgotten or not paid attention?
Well, and I think that the little but the reason I was talking about what's in my studio is it's whatever inspire. Like my room needs to inspire me, or whatever, like the way certain photo will or anything can inspire you. So
Yeah.
The things that are on my walls here in my studio all have some meaning to me. And I've always been a little annoyed. Like I was a little annoyed with myself. There was a point in time when I was in my other house. It was 2-story and I had a stairway. And going up that whole stairway was sort of like the wall of Ross. It was like all the gold records and whatever. And it was sort of a little shrine to I'm so fucking cool. And and thank goodness the earthquake took all that shit down and threw it on the floor and broke the glass and basically kicked everyone's ass here in Southern California in 1994, and sort of scrambled our eggs a bit and made us sort of again rethink what was important. And when I got all that shit off the floor and cleaned it all up, there were a couple of plaques that reminded me how important they were. And then all these other plaques that didn't mean honestly fuck all. And they were just plaques. And so the ones that matter to me are the ones that are on my wall with their own little moment that remind me of where I come from, which helps me kind of get me back on like, where am I going? Because I don't think you ever want to forget where you came from.
Yeah.
But what horrible thing when you talk to someone and go, man, my high school years were the best days of my life. And I think, oh, how miserable.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel very, very fortunate to be loving what I do and wanting to continue doing it for a long time. And by the way, I loved your answer because one thing I'm learning about you is sometimes I get the New York punk answer at the beginning of your answer, and then you go deep, and I get the really mindful answer that's totally awesome and brilliant along the way. Because like your description, your reminder to us of just letting our studio be, reflect who we are is really insightful. And I think it's great and it's encouraging. And, rewinding a little bit to what you said earlier about how, I think you were saying this, right? That we can find ourselves trying to chase somebody else's idea and somebody else's direction. But in the meditation, we get down and we really quiet things down and we begin to hear ourselves, listen to me, which is really we, and let that come forward, even in the artwork in our studio.
Yeah, I think the we part's real important in the end, but it's still going to start with me. It all emanates out of me. So, boy, are we a couple of deep motherfuckers, right?
I know it.
Holy
I know
shit.
it. Thanks for hanging with us, rock stars. I hope this is fun. We don't always have to talk about gear stuff, but I promise I'll try and pivot us back there a little more too. But I
know your people are sitting there going, "Oh man, these two, what the hell? We just want to know how to do it."
Yeah, well, this is it. This is how to do it. This is part of it.
Here's the what do they say? Here's the spoiler alert. Sorry.
Yeah. This is not financial advice. I am not a lawyer.
Sorry, on this podcast, you will not learn anything specific.
All right, Ross, I'm going to hit you with another question. I'm going to hit you with another one. You mentioned R.E.M. Life's Rich Pageant. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, making that record? Like, how did you guys, what do you remember about some takeaways from that record or how you guys did it? Anything you can share about just sort of how you recorded the band and put it all together at that point? Because that's a very, very important record for sure. For me, for many of our listeners.
Now, the takeaway is that band knew who they were. As much as some people might think that they were stumbling their way, they really got along together, man. They had chemistry. And each one of them had their own special. That was when Bill Berry was still playing drums. He was the real drummer, the original drummer. Then that ended up with a brain aneurysm and he had to stop playing. But they just got along with each other, and they were just, as much as they were really deep in their own way, thinkers, they were just really good dudes from Georgia, from Athens, wherever each one of them grew up specifically. They had met each other in Athens. And we had put and built this studio outside of Bloomington, Indiana for Mellencamp. And he went on the road with Scarecrow, which ended up being, a real lengthy tour on a major record. And the studio was empty, it was not only going to be empty, but it was empty already. And Don Gaiman, who was Mellencamp's co-producer with John, was sort of at the height. He caught lightning in a bottle a few times in his life, because he went on to produce not only, John, but he caught lightning with Hootie and the Blowfish too later. But the bottom line is, then caught it with R.E.M. And so he said, we're going to do R.E.M. We're going to cut it, we're going to do it at John's, and then we'll bring it back to L.A. and mix it here in L.A. And so they came into town, and the first thing that Mills and Barry did were they went and rented a couple of boats, just like little, like rowboats, to go row out into the middle of Lake Monroe, where we were staying in condos, to go fishing and go fishing in the mornings, and just get out in the boat. You talk about meditation. They just want to get out in the boat, go fishing. So, some days, I mean, I wasn't really, dude, I wasn't that far removed in 1986 from, I got out to, California in the late 70s, but I wasn't that far removed from being a punk. And so I was like, God, these guys go fishing, but, okay. So, I did a fair amount of, sitting in a boat, talking and fishing, and this is not like this is like, we'd row out into Lake Monroe. So that was its own little piece there. Like, had nothing to do with the recording, but it just had to do with how much they like to spend time with each other, and John had these condos out on Lake Monroe, that he owned, that we would use, and John used them for his band, different bandmates that would come in and out of town. And like for me, when we went and made records. And the thing I learned about the band was Stipe, the brilliant lyricist, but Mills was sort of like the John Paul Jones of the band. He played organ, he arranged, and he came up with all those contrapuntal harmonies, all those, like Stipe will sing "Fall on Me," and and then there'll be this whole secondary line happening behind "Fall on Me," or Cuyahoga, all those, So Mills is the secret weapon of R.E.M. And he's the guy that comes up with all that really cool contrapuntal harmonies and all that stuff, and the organ parts but just as a band, they were and are, but were just a killer rock band that played live, and we tracked live, and Buck always played those Rickenbackers, so he had a real specific kind of tone through AC30s and combo amps. And it was just really fun, again, having learned and coming from like the you got to get it and get it now mentality with Mellencamp, and just carrying that into that recording session, and then getting into overdubs, which is like, okay, now we're going to weave all these different, we're going to pull out, talk about painting, we're going to pull out the palette of colors and start painting. And there are a lot of hidden, interesting textures and overdubs and little things hidden, because in analog, you'd have to like label, on the one track, on the verse, you might have a triangle, but then you might have the organ part, and then you might have a background vocal that shows up on the third verse or second. You know what I'm saying? We used to have to like squeeze everything we could onto one piece of 24 track, because in Indiana, we didn't have 2 tape machines.
Yeah.
And then we still had to like go, well, are we going to mix this by hand, or is this going out of town and we're going to mix it with some John's records? You'd all mix by hand, but that record was mixed on an SSL in Can-Am here in LA. So, but it was just really fun. And it was also, for me, there was this whole expectation of like, when we finish this record, I'm going back to LA and I'm getting married too. So,
nice.
And I'll just be really blunt. Like those guys, were college, like student, like the the girls would go crazy when Mills and Buck and Barry walked through town. Stipe had his own world, and he never really hung out in the bars and did the craziness that we did. But man, you talk about rock stars. Like, I didn't realize what like college student rock stars they already were. Like out in the main world, maybe they weren't like that, like super well known yet, because they weren't to me that big. But man, walking around Bloomington, the girls would go nuts for these guys, you know? And it was, I was like, wow, you know, I'm hanging out with like, you know, because for me, I was never, you know, like, I don't know, it just, I was never even remotely impressed, because that's just me, like with anybody, you know, impressed with who you're, like kind of person you are, not like, oh, you know, because I did come up working with a lot of rock stars as a guitar tech. So I was always more impressed by the people who were nice to people than the people who thought they were somebody. So, nice. You know, R.E.M., we're so humble, but we're really blown away, like being in Bloomington, which is a huge, you know, that's Indiana University. So it's, I think, you know, whatever the population of Bloomington is, probably about at that point, 2/3 of it were college students, you know, maybe 40,000 kids or whatever there are that go to IU, 25,000, 30,000 kids. So man, you walk around and go to the bars at night. I was really impressed. Like, oh wow, these guys are, you know.
50 years ago, William G. Dilley introduced the world to his revolutionary new dynamics processor, the Model 610 Complementer. A truly unique device, the Model 610 was not only the fastest, cleanest, and quietest of its type, but was also capable of providing completely separate peak limiting and compression functions. Today, Spectra 1964 introduces the Model C610 Complementer, described as the most versatile piece of audio gear you can buy. Great for adding control and power to everything from vocals, guitars, and bass to mixing and even mastering, the C610 gives you the same massive sound that rocked legendary studios like Stax, Ardent, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant. It even has enough gain to function as a mic preamp. I'm using the C610 on every record I make at the Toy Box Studio, and you should too. You'll love it. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. So you just finished an awesome mix and sent it off to the band, but the singer texts you with lyric changes, the drummer emails you wanting a different fill, and the bass player DMs you about a wrong note in the chorus. But which mix version were they talking about anyway? Don't you wish there was an easier way? Samply.app comes to the rescue as your ultimate mix assistant, streaming full resolution audio so your clients can easily listen and send notes from their mobile phone on the road or the computer back at the studio. All mix comments are time-stamped directly onto the correct mix version with no confusion, and you also get A/B listening capability with synchronized playback and level matching for easy mix comparison, all inside Samply. It's file sharing that was built specifically for music, and it all works inside your browser with no downloads required. Sign up now for your free account with 25 gigs of storage and unlimited projects, and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade at samply.app. You know, what's funny is 86, when you guys were making that record, I was in St. Louis starting my college at Washington University. And the very first band that everybody was so excited about to introduce me to was R.E.M. I didn't know anything about it, but they were super. They were the coolest band to listen to at that point, you know. And then along came the Replacements to join them in that kind of along with some other cool independent artists. But the you know, Superman, which is on that record, that was also one of the first songs I remember learning on guitar and singing and like learning the lyrics to and covering just for fun, you know, just so I could have something to bang out on the campfire. So that was a very important record.
There's always a song, it seems, on some of these records that ends up being the very last song that gets recorded, and it ends up being like one of the most important ones. Because that, you know, not not like that song lyrically is that important, but it ended up being, it was like an afterthought where somewhere along the way, we're way beyond tracking, like the drums had been torn down because we had already finished all the tracks. The tracks are done. Those guys powered through all the basics, and Barry basically sat in the control room after the first, 7 or 8 days, and just like then would come up with ideas with him and Mills, and then, whatever. Those guys were super tight. But it was somewhere like, 6 weeks into I think we recorded in Indiana for, 6-7 weeks, maybe a couple of months tops. And so we're really close to finishing the record as far as recording it. And I don't know whether it was Peter, or I'm not sure who brought in Superman. It might've been Stipe, and said, we're going to do this cover song. Cause it's a cover song. It's not, they didn't write it.
Yeah. Wait, who wrote that? Do you remember? I don't
know. You'd have to look it up.
Okay.
Use them Googles.
I'll do
Googles. It. Yeah. You got them Googles in front of you. Yeah. Cause I just remember them saying, man, we got this song we want to cover. And Game and I kind of groaning like, oh man, you're going to make me fucking like set up tracking again and move everything, which is, that's that is the, it doesn't matter how old or young you are. There's always a curmudgeon in us, like, oh man, really? I got to set up tracking again, because it happens, So that's what we did. We set up tracking, and they did "I Am Superman," which everyone's like, how can you not love that song? It's just so much fun.
Yeah. Okay. Google came through for us here. Mitchell Bottler and Gary Zeckley, originally released as the B-side of the Clicks hit "Sugar on Sunday."
What year?
It doesn't say. Oh, 1969. Oh, 1969 song by the Texas band The Click. Made more famous in 1986 when it was recorded by R.E.M. and Ross Hogarth.
I mean, who would ever have, like, when they brought that song in, Gaiman and I were like, this is awesome. We have to record this. This is so good.
That's great.
It was like, we did that on Mellencamp's Big Daddy. We'd already finished mixing that record, and John was like, I want to cover Let It All Hang Out, which you can use them Googles for that too. That's like, who did Let It All Hang Out first? It's the 60s, Let It All Hang Out. It's just such a fun song. And
I'm a slow typer. That's my only excuse there. So let's see what it says. Nope. Don't have an answer for you yet. It's a 1967 song by the Hombres.
Yeah. So Mellencamp brought that one in, which is rare that he would want to do a cover song, but he was like, oh man, we got to do this song. Cause Big Daddy is a very morose record. It's about basically he's writing about what an asshole he is, and that's why his relationship, he's getting divorced, and so he needed something on that record that wasn't so sad or pissed off.
Yeah.
It's always funny. And then, like, the artist that I made his record last year, and we actually did really well. I think we ended up James McMurtry, The Horses and the Hounds, which John helped get James signed, and we did his first 2 records in Indiana in the late 80s and early 90s. And James's record that I produced this year and engineered and mixed was like top 50 Rolling Stone Americana. And I think number 1, No Depression, at least somewhere up there at the very top of
right on.
And the same thing with James, they were making his first record. Everything's all torn down. We're about to load out. And Mellencamp was yelling at James about, like, man, you never even wrote a hit for this record. So James took a couple of cartons of Winston's and went back to a hotel room and wrote this song called Painting by Numbers, which ends up being his first single. And I got to set it all back up, set everything up, and go tracking that last song, that first single, so
that's cool.
You never know, you got to always be, this just goes back to, like, got to be willing to not know.
Can I sort of close out with another question? And this time I'll circle the wagon back towards geekery and gear and the studio stuff. You just finished.
Geekery.
Yeah. We love geekery. So you just finished Johnny Winter's tribute record, and we didn't really get into talking about guitar tones and guitar miking and things like that. Are there any stories you can share around some of the ways that you decided to record the guitars on that record?
Well, I mean, it's always about the source. So each guy, depending on who they were, most of them have their own sort of element of tone merchant, so Warren Haynes had just played a live show, so his gear was on his truck, and he paused his semi and his tour bus to be able to get a couple of his favorite heads. And I rented a couple of cabinets with very specific speakers that he had recommended that that he liked. And then I brought in a old Tweed. And so I love mixing and matching gear, like not mixing and matching, but I like using more than one source sometimes. Like I like if a sound is going to be supposed to be coming from the center, I like using 2 amps at the same time and sort of pan them out from the center so it stays away from the bass and the kick and the snare and the lead vocal.
Yeah.
So like with Joe Bonamassa, he had on one of the songs that he played on Self-Destructive Blues, he brought in his J.J. Cale 410 Bassman, and that's all he used on Self-Destructive. And then on the next song that he ended up playing on called Meantown Blues, he and I talked about it ahead of time, and I said it'd be really nice to use a couple of amps to spread out, the slide, that's all there is on these songs. Unlike Self-Destructive, there is a piano, but on Meantown, it's just bass, drums, and guitar, the way that Johnny always did it, and a vocal. And so, so I'm a big fan of splitting the signal into 2 heads, and sometimes into, even like with Warren, it was into 3. There was a left, right, and center. Steve Lukather has a left, right, and a center that's wet. Mm-hmm. So there's a wet channel. But I'm always using a Royer. I'm always using a Royer. Like I haven't almost basically done a guitar recording in probably 20 some odd years without a Royer. And if it's not a Royer, it's like 167, like using just like on a small combo where you just have 167 back from it.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of the blend between a Royer and either a 57 or a 409, and then having a room mic. I always love the room mic. And a microphone that I need to actually pimp a little bit is a company called Roswell.
Oh yeah.
Matt is making some amazing microphones because I always pimp Royer. I always pimp Mojave. And I'm a huge fan of 67s.
Yeah.
But Matt is making this mic called a Colaris, which is this large diaphragm looking bronze, like the golden looking mic that is just amazing. And it's one of my favorite mics, period, now. And I've used that as my guitar room mic pretty much extensively on this whole record instead of a 67.
Oh, cool. I know it's got some selectable settings on it. Anything that you remember choosing as far as the settings?
No, I just use it. I use it flat or whatever flat. I mean, flat's fine for me. I tend to not use much filtering on a microphone. I like to do it myself. So that mic flat it's really explosive. It's really great microphone. Sounds really terrific.
I'm a big fan of the Roswell Pro Audio microphones. Matt has been a guest on the show too, and he's shared some really great tips on how to actually round out your mic locker, Rockstars. So make sure to listen to that episode as well.
Because I use the K47s in a lot of room on a lot of, like I'll go in and bring those K47s into Sunset Sound very often and use them. Like the house engineer at Sunset, a guy named Jeff Neal, who's we were talking earlier about, when we have compadres, so to speak, guys that we love making records with. And, Jeff is a really great engineer, but he has been, assisting at Sunset for many years. And when I go into Sunset, a lot of times we'll play around with like, whatever's the best mics in the room and try to beat what we already know to be really good. And at some point, quite a few years back, maybe 4 or 5, when the Roswells first came out and we threw up those K47s, we both looked at each other and it was kind of like, oh, well, these are kicking ass. Nice. And then have tried to, we've tried to beat those K47s at Sunset in the far room position and nothing else. They still are winning and he's got a pair. And so for your fans out there, your rock stars, I highly recommend the K47s and the Colaris and what Roswell makes. They got a Delphos that works really good. Yeah, it's just, I'm digging them.
Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has not gotten you anywhere? Have you been looking for a simple or straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could learn that process from a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here's a quote from one of the students. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. This was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and go check out Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick now for free. The Delphos is one of my favorite mics for my voice. I have some more mics in my collection now, but when I was shooting out, I think I'd probably still pick it. When I was shooting out a vocal mic for myself for my own record, I was like, well, I can, so I might as well I might as well put myself through the mic shootout ringer instead of somebody else and listen to my voice on 20 different microphones. And the Delphos that was the winner for me. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, they're really good. So I'm glad that we are talking about that because I like to give Matt some love. I always give Phil Moore at Retro love because he's been such an influential part of my career as far as his gear. Mm-hmm. I love Wade at Chandler Audio. Wade's gear is always a big part of my recordings. Whether it's a Germanium mic pre or an EMI EQ or between those two guys, and then there's a new guy, Bryce Gonzalez at Highland Dynamics, the BG2, and he's done some mods for me on my Altex, the BG2 compressor, and Bryce and Highland Dynamics are amazing. These are guys that they just have a sensibility of gear that makes music. When you put it through their gear, it's musical. And that's what I like about Royers. You put up a Royer in front of an instrument, it helps you make it. I'm someone who I will always gravitate and lean toward real. And I like to say this like about my own self and career. It's like, I don't ever want to be a big deal. I just want to be the real deal. And so the gear that I use, I don't care if they're a big deal or not. I don't care if other people think they're the big deal. I want to just use the real deal. And so when there's a guy like a Matt, making gear at Roswell that just makes music. And another one that it's a guy named Phil, and I don't know his last name, but he and his son, they have ear trumpet microphones.
Oh, yeah. Ear Trumpet Labs or whatever, right? They do the live stage mics that are made out of tea strainer baskets and stuff.
Yeah, it's steampunk looking. They look really cool, but they sound really awesome too.
Yeah, they really do.
So it's that steampunk thing. And it's like, I don't know, I love what I do. I love doing it with people that love what we're doing. And I love experimenting, but I have learned to not turn this into a science project because it's still always about making music. And you got to get it. You got to get it now. And you got to get it as fast as possible so you don't lose the inspiration. So when it becomes more about me than the music, I got to get out of the way. But when you use gear that helps me make music, it usually makes it faster for me because the minute I put it through it, it sounds good.
Yep.
And so, if I stick a microphone that doesn't make something sound better, I'm probably not going to use it again that many more times. I might try it a few more times, but I'll eventually just go, okay, next. And so, yeah, with Edgar's record, it's primarily Royers and the Colaris, and then sometimes it's a 67, but more often it's just a Royer and a 57 blended together with a little touch of maybe API or Chandler EQ, passive, the passive EMI EQ, and get out of the way. Let them play.
Yeah. That's like a Richard Dodd statement too. It's just like, one of the things he described as learning was just get out of the way. Just don't mess up the record. This is the big takeaway.
Yeah. Richard does, he masters almost all my records as if I can help it. And we both have the Hippocratic. We like to, I'd rather take the Hippocratic oath about engineering that I would rather try to do no harm. So
not the food is thy medicine part.
No. But if you can't help it, don't hurt it.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, let me ask you our closing question, which we've done before, but it's been a while. I like to ask this at the end of the show. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you can go back and find young Ross, the punk rocker who's thinking about making records and doing stuff. Maybe considering moving out to the West Coast, and you say, look, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself, Ross?
Try to be kind. Try to be kind. Be kind. Be kinder. That's my own advice to myself.
All right.
Try to get along better with people and be kind. And listen to what's coming out of the speakers, not what's coming out of your head.
Nice. Well, dude, thank you so much for joining us on the show, man. What a pleasure to hang with you again. I had no idea we were going to get so deep into all the things that we did, but I'm really, really glad we did. So appreciate you taking time out to do this with us. Yeah,
it was a blast. And I hope everybody, first off, I hope everybody takes care of each other. And go check out my Edgar winner. It's called Brother Johnny. It's coming out April 15th. So if this podcast comes out and it's later than that, it will already be out. I'm really proud of it. And it should have a really cool lenticular cover for the vinyl. That when you turn it, it's like, remember the Stones, what was their acid trippy cover? Well, this one, lenticular, when you turn it, it morphs Johnny's face into Edgar's face into Johnny's face. It's really
that's cool. Great. That's great. I'm trying to remember what I used to call that as a kid. I probably called it 3D, or something.
Yeah. Well, the real term is lenticular. And so I'm really proud of this record. And because it hasn't come out yet, I'm mentioning it. And then, like you said, if this podcast comes out, it'll be already out. But
it'll be out. It'll be out by now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm really proud of it, and I'm proud of the work. And I think it's, honors the legacy of Johnny. And that's the best we can do. Yeah. So I'm just going to, I'm going to try to keep keeping on and doing good work. And I appreciate the chance to just shoot the shit with you, Liz. I really do. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, dude. It's an honor to hang out with you. And again, thank you for your time and thank you for all your insights. Let the rock stars know where they can go find you online. Where would you like them to go check out your latest and greatest? What if they are ready to, make their next hit record? Where should they go?
Oh, you mean my Instagram is Ross_Hogarth Mix, Ross Hogarth Mix. Used to be Boogie Motel, but no one knew that. So I just changed it to Ross Hogarth Mix. And so, yeah, I'm live on Instagram. I put up some stuff that's happening on Instagram. I don't do a whole lot of live stuff, but yeah. And then my website, Hoax Productions, I got to update it. I need a good web guy. So if you have a good web person, Lidge, hit me up.
Unfortunately, I'm my own good web guy, and I'm already like, about to fire myself.
Well, I need that. I need to update my website. It's a little clunky, but Hoax Productions, HOAX Productions with an S.com. That's my joke to myself, because all production is really a hoax. If you don't have a good artist, then what are you really doing? And unfortunately, not to get political, but that word's been overly misused in the last 4 or 5 years. So it's pissed me off, because as Hogarth, I grew up being called hokey, hoax. So when I started my production company in '86, I called it Hoax Productions, because it was my own tongue in cheek to myself.
Hey, man.
But that's where I'm at Insta. And that's it, man. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and much love to everybody, and peace out.
Bye for now. You too, man. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you around the studio, Ross.
Keep on rocking.
Cheers, man.
Okay. Peace, Liz.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible: API, OWC, Spectra 1964, Samply, Atom Audio, and Isotope. Remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription for access to many plugins. At samply.app, sign up for a free account with unlimited projects, and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade to a pro account. At recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course for a limited time. You will find links to all these awesome sponsors in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.